Who gave you that bruise? Damian Cross did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The entire room seemed to go still around him. Grace Miller stood beneath the brass desk lamp, one hand gripping her apron, the other hiding the tremble in her fingers. Purple bruising stained her jaw dark enough to tell a story she was too afraid to speak. Most people know what it feels like to hide pain just to survive another day. But Grace was hiding hers inside the home of the most feared Mafia boss on the New Jersey coast. What happened next was not a rescue. It was the beginning of a dangerous bargain between protection power and possession. Stay until the end, because this story asks one terrifying question: is safety still love when it costs you your freedom? Like the video and comment where you're watching from, the woman who learned to disappear. The question remained suspended between them. Who gave you that bruise? Grace could hear the rain striking the windows behind Damian Cross. She could feel the warmth of the fire against her back and the cold attention of the man standing in front of her. Her lips parted. No answer came. For one trembling second, her mind fled the study and returned to the place where the bruise had begun. 48 hours earlier, Grace Miller had still believed invisibility could save her. At 5 a.m, the Cross estate looked almost peaceful. Mist rolled in from the Atlantic and settled across the 70 acres of black grass, old stone walls, and twisted coastal trees. Beyond the cliffs, waves crashed against the rocks with the steady violence of something that had been trying to break the land for centuries. Grace entered the main house through the servant's door. She wore a plain black dress, a white apron, and shoes soft enough to make no sound on polished floors. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight knot at the base of her neck. No jewelry, no perfume, nothing that might invite attention. The estate had been designed to impress politicians, businessmen, and men whose names never appeared in newspapers. Its windows were tall and bulletproof. Its staircases curved beneath crystal chandeliers. Paintings older than the state of New Jersey watched from walls covered in dark silk. To Grace, it was not beautiful. It was a machine. Every room had a function. Every door had a rule. Every person had a place. Her place was behind everyone else. She crossed the empty foyer carrying a bucket of hot water. A dark stain marked the white marble near the bottom of the staircase. Blood. Not much. A few drops and a long smear as though someone had been dragged by the arm. Grace set down the bucket. She dipped a cloth into the water and began to scrub. She did not wonder whose blood it was. She did not look toward the closed doors of the West Hall. She did not ask why 2 armed men had stood outside the library until almost 3 a.m. At Blackwater Point, questions had consequences. Mrs. Whitmore had explained that on Grace's first day. The head housekeeper had stood in the service kitchen with her gray hair pinned perfectly above her collar and a ring of keys hanging from her waist. 3 rules, she had said. Do not listen. Do not remember. Do not become interesting. Grace had followed those rules for 2 years. She knew which floorboard outside Damian's study gave a soft groan. She knew which cabinet held the bourbon Logan Cross stole when he did not want Damian to count the bottles. She knew that Caleb Mercer took his coffee with 1 spoonful of sugar but never allowed anyone to see him at it. She knew enough to be dangerous, so she behaved as if she knew nothing at all. By 7, the house had awakened. Chefs shouted over copper pans in the kitchen. Security guards changed positions near the front entrance. Black cars rolled through the gates and disappeared beneath the covered drive. Grace moved among them like smoke. She replaced flowers in the East Hall. She carried fresh towels to the guest suites. She polished fingerprints from the glass doors outside the private dining room. Men passed her while discussing cargo containers' casino accounts and a police captain who had become expensive. No one lowered their voice. No one looked at her. That was how Grace preferred it. At 10:30, she entered a storage room and locked the door behind her. The room smelled of soap linen and lemon polish. Shelves rose to the ceiling on both sides. There was barely enough space for her to stand between them. Grace took her phone from her apron. 3 missed calls waited on the screen. The number was not saved, but she recognized it. Her stomach tightened. A message appeared before she could put the phone away. Payment is due Friday. A second message followed. Your brother leaves the garage at 6. Grace stared at the words. The storage room seemed to shrink. She pictured Evan stepping out of the repair shop in his oil-stained work clothes. He always left through the side door because the main entrance stuck in wet weather. He usually stopped at the vending machine before walking to the bus. The Barrett crew knew his schedule. A third message appeared. Do not make us visit him. Grace deleted all three. It changed nothing. She could still see every word. Her father had borrowed $40,000 from the Barrett crew during the last year of his life. He had told Grace the money was for medical bills and mortgage payments. After his funeral, a man named Russell Barrett had shown her the signed agreement. Most of the money had gone to cards, sports bets, and private games in casino rooms where desperate men were encouraged to believe one more hand could save them. Interest had doubled the debt. Fees appeared whenever Grace questioned the total. Missed payments created new penalties. The number had reached $80,000 before she understood that the Barretts did not want the debt repaid quickly. They wanted it alive. A living debt produced obedience. It kept Grace working. It kept Evan vulnerable. It gave the Barrett crew a reason to remain in their lives. Grace called her brother. He answered on the fourth ring. Noise filled the line. Metal struck metal. An engine coughed somewhere nearby. Hey, Evan said. You caught me before lunch. You sound busy. Mr. Riley has me rebuilding a transmission. He says if I do not ruin it, I might actually deserve a paycheck. Grace leaned against the shelf. Despite everything, she smiled. That sounds almost like praise. From him, it is a marriage proposal. She heard him move away from the garage floor. You okay? He asked. I'm fine. You always say that. Because I am always fine. That is statistically impossible. Grace closed her eyes. Evan had their mother's laugh. Warm, careless, and completely out of place in Grace's world. He told her the garage owner might offer him a permanent position. That is good, Grace said. It means I can start helping with bills. No, Grace, you need to save your money. For what? For your life. There was a pause. I thought this was my life. Grace looked at the shelves surrounding her, folded sheets, bottles of cleaner, boxes of white gloves. No, she said softly. It is only the beginning. Evan asked whether she would come to his apartment for dinner on Sunday. He had bought a second chair for the kitchen table. Grace looked through the narrow window in the storage room door. A security guard crossed the corridor outside. I'll try. You said that last week. I know. And the week before. I know. You cannot live at that place forever. Grace pressed her fingers against her forehead. I do not live here. The lie sounded weak even to her. Mrs. Whitmore's voice cut through the hallway. Grace ended the call. I have to go. Sunday, Evan said. I'll try. She put the phone away and opened the door. Mrs. Whitmore stood outside holding a clipboard. You have been missing for 6 minutes. I was checking the linen count. You were hired to clean rooms, not disappear into them. Grace lowered her eyes. Yes, Mrs. Whitmore. The older woman studied her face. For a moment, Grace wondered if she could see the fear left by the Barrett message. Then Mrs. Whitmore handed her a list. The south bedrooms need attention. Mr. Cross has guests arriving tomorrow. Grace took the paper. As she turned away, Mrs. Whitmore spoke again, hair above the collar. Grace touched the knot at her neck. It is. Keep it that way. Mr. Logan has returned. The warning was quiet. Grace looked back. Mrs. Whitmore had already moved on. Logan Cross arrived shortly before noon. Grace heard him before she saw him. His laughter moved through the entrance hall, loud and careless. A bottle struck the edge of a table. One of the guards muttered something under his breath. Logan was Damian's cousin, though the two men seemed to share little beyond their last name. Damian Cross entered a room and made people calculate every word before speaking. Logan entered and made people search for the nearest exit. He was handsome in the careless way money often made possible. Expensive suit, perfect teeth, dark hair pushed back from his forehead. A gold watch he wore too loosely because he liked the sound it made against a whiskey glass. Grace was replacing flowers in the front parlor when he passed the doorway. His steps stopped. She felt his attention before he spoke. The quiet one. Grace continued arranging white roses. Good afternoon, Mr. Cross. Logan entered the room. Which one am I? Grace's fingers paused around a stem. Sir, you called me Mr. Cross. Which one? She kept her eyes on the vase. Mr. Logan Cross. He smiled. Better. Grace moved one rose half an inch to the left. Logan stood behind her, close enough that she could smell alcohol beneath his cologne. "You always look at flowers when men speak to you. I was told to finish the arrangement." "By whom, Mrs. Whitmore?" Logan laughed softly. "You are afraid of the housekeeper." Grace lifted the empty flower box. "I should return this." She stepped around him. He did not stop her. Not then. But his eyes followed her out of the room. The rest of the day passed beneath that attention. Grace saw Logan near the kitchen leaning against the door while she carried plates. He appeared in the east corridor while she dusted picture frames. At dinner, he sat beside Damian and spoke too loudly about a nightclub in Philadelphia. Grace served wine without raising her eyes. When she reached Logan's chair, he placed 2 fingers over the rim of his glass. She stopped pouring. "Look at me," he said. Conversation continued around the table, but Grace felt the shift in the room. Caleb Mercer glanced toward her. Damian remained focused on the man seated across from him. Grace lifted her gaze only as far as Logan's collar. His smile widened. Higher. Logan. Damian spoke without looking up. One word. Nothing more. Logan removed his fingers from the glass. Grace finished pouring and moved away. She did not breathe normally again until she reached the kitchen. At 11 that night, Mrs. Whitmore told her to take the trash to the incinerator. The rain had returned. Grace tied the final black bag and dragged it through the service corridor. Her shoulders ached from 14 hours of work. Her feet burned inside damp shoes. The service door opened onto a narrow courtyard behind the garage. Floodlights buzzed above the stone walls. Rain struck the cobblestones and flowed in silver streams toward the drains. Grace carried the bag toward the metal container. She lifted it with both arms and pushed it over the edge. The weight dropped inside with a heavy thud. Still disappearing, Grace froze. Logan stepped from beneath the garage roof. His tie was gone. His white shirt was open at the throat. He carried a glass in one hand and a cigarette in the other. Grace looked toward the service door. It was 20 feet away. "Good evening, Mr. Cross. You said that earlier." She wiped rain from her forehead. "I need to return to the kitchen. You need to learn how conversations work." He walked closer. Grace remained still. The courtyard suddenly felt much smaller than it had a moment ago. Logan stopped in front of her. Rain darkened his shoulders. "You speak," he said, "then I decide when you leave." Grace lowered her gaze to his shoes. Black leather, wet at the edges, one lace slightly loose. "I have finished my work outside. That was not permission." Grace tried to step around him. Logan moved with her. The service door remained behind his shoulder. He took a drink and studied her over the glass. "Damian likes his staff quiet." Grace said nothing. "He thinks silence means loyalty." Another step brought him closer. "I think it means people are hiding interesting things." "I am not hiding anything." Logan reached for her face. Grace turned away, but his fingers closed around her chin. His grip was harder than necessary. "There she is." Grace's pulse hammered beneath his hand. "Please let go. Please." His thumb pressed into her cheek. "You can do better than that." Grace kept her body still. She had learned that frightened movement could entertain cruel men. Logan tilted her face toward the floodlight. "You are not bad looking under all that gray." Her uniform was black. He was too drunk to care. "Smile." Grace's jaw tightened. "Mrs. Whitmore is waiting for me." Something changed in his expression. It was small, but Grace saw it. The suggestion that another person's authority mattered more than his. Logan stepped forward, forcing Grace back against the brick wall. The surface was cold through her dress. "You think that old woman can protect you? I did not say that. You did not have to." His hand tightened around her jaw. Grace smelled whiskey on his breath. "Let go of me." The words were barely louder than the rain. Logan stared at her. Grace had obeyed every instruction until that moment. She had kept her eyes down. She had answered politely. She had made herself small. But the refusal was there. He heard it. His pride heard it. "You work in my family's house," he said. Grace looked at him for the first time. Not at his collar, not at his shoes, at his eyes. "I work for Damian Cross." Logan's face emptied. For 1 second the courtyard became completely still. Then he shoved her. Grace's shoe slid across the wet stones. She reached for the wall, but her hand caught only rain. The left side of her face struck the sharp brick corner beside the service door. Light burst behind her eyes. Her knees hit the ground. Sound disappeared. The world became a white flash, then a deep ringing that filled her skull. Grace pressed one hand to the stones. Blood warmed the inside of her mouth. She had bitten through her cheek. Rain ran over her face and carried a thin red line down her neck. Logan stood above her. His breathing was uneven. For the briefest moment, fear moved through his eyes. Not fear for Grace, fear of consequences. Then his mouth twisted. "You should watch where you are going." He dropped the cigarette beside her hand. It hissed against the wet stone. Logan turned and walked back into the house. The service door closed behind him. Grace remained on the ground. Her cheek pulsed with every heartbeat. She touched the injury and pulled her fingers away quickly. No broken skin. The pain lived deeper. She wanted to cry. Instead, she picked up the cigarette and placed it in the trash. Then she stood. The kitchen was nearly empty when she returned. A dishwasher glanced at her wet uniform. Grace turned her injured side away. "Slipped outside," she said before he could ask. He nodded without interest. That was the mercy of being invisible. No one looked long enough to notice when you were bleeding. By morning, the bruise had spread across the left side of her face. Grace stood beneath the harsh light of the staff bathroom and examined it. Purple over the cheekbone, black near the jaw, yellow beginning at the edges. She opened her mouth. Pain shot toward her ear. On the sink sat a tube of cheap concealer. Grace applied one layer, then another. The makeup turned the bruise gray. It did not hide anything. She washed it away and let her hair fall over her cheek. Mrs. Whitmore noticed immediately. Hair above the collar. I burned my neck. With what a curling iron. Mrs. Whitmore's eyes narrowed. Grace turned her right side toward her. A chef shouted from the kitchen. Mrs. Whitmore looked toward the sound, then back at Grace. "Pin it up before dinner service." "Yes, Mrs. Whitmore." Grace spent the day avoiding occupied rooms. She volunteered to clean guest bedrooms that had not been used in months. She polished silver inside the pantry. She reorganized towels that did not need organizing. Whenever she heard Logan's voice, she found another corridor. Whenever she heard Damian's, she stopped breathing. By 11 that night, she believed she had survived the worst of it. Then Mrs. Whitmore appeared in the pantry carrying a silver tray. A porcelain cup sat beside a black coffee pot. 3 leather ledgers were stacked beneath a red folder. "Take this to Mr. Cross." Grace stared at the tray. "Could Anna take it? Anna has gone home. I can finish the silver." Mr. Cross asked for the quarterly ledgers. Mrs. Whitmore placed the tray in Grace's hands. The weight pulled at her wrists. "Mrs. Whitmore." The older woman looked at her. Grace nearly told her. She nearly moved her hair and showed the bruise. Then she imagined the Barrett message. "Your brother leaves the garage at 6. I do not think I should go into the study." Mrs. Whitmore's expression hardened. "Mr. Cross does not arrange his evening around the comfort of the staff." Grace lowered her head. "No. No what no, Mrs. Whitmore. Wash your hands, take the tray, do not keep him waiting." Grace washed her hands until the skin turned red. Then she carried the tray into the east wing. The corridors grew quieter as she approached Damian's study. 2 guards stood outside the doors. One checked the tray. The other searched Grace with efficient, impersonal hands. Neither looked closely at her face. The doors opened. Damian sat behind his desk beneath the brass lamp. He did not look up. "Set it beside me." Grace entered. She placed the tray down. She turned away, opened the red ledger. Her blood went cold. Grace returned to the desk. She opened the book. Her hair slipped from her cheek. Damian reached for his coffee and stopped. Silence filled the room. He stood. He came around the desk. He made her look at him. Then he asked the question she had been avoiding since the courtyard. "Who gave you that bruise?" Grace stared into the eyes of the most dangerous man in New Jersey. "If I tell you I lose my job, you will not lose your job. You cannot promise that. I decide who remains in this house." His hand rose. Grace flinched. Damian stopped before touching her. Something dark moved behind his eyes. When his fingers finally reached her, they did not strike. His thumb caught the tear sliding down her uninjured cheek. "Tell me his name." Grace thought of Logan's hand around her jaw. She thought of his smile. She thought of Evan leaving the garage alone at 6. Her voice broke when she answered. Logan. Damian became still. Logan, who Grace could barely breathe. Logan Cross. For 5 seconds, Damian said nothing. Then he walked behind his desk and lifted the telephone. His face showed no rage. That frightened Grace more than rage ever could. Ben. He listened for a moment. Find my cousin. Grace tightened both hands around her apron. Damian's eyes remained on her as he delivered the order. Bring him to the old seafood warehouse. A pause followed. Damian's voice lowered. Keep him conscious. The monster wakes. The line went silent after Damian said the words. Keep him conscious. Grace stood beside the desk, unable to move. Damian placed the receiver back in its cradle with the same care he had used when setting down his pen. No sudden motion, no raised voice, nothing that suggested rage. That absence of emotion made the room feel colder. Grace stared at him. What are you going to do? Damian looked at her bruised cheek again. Go to your room. Her fingers tightened around her apron. Mr. Cross, you are finished for the night. I asked what you were going to do. His gaze lifted to hers. It was the first time Grace had challenged him directly, and for 1 second she expected the walls themselves to react. Damian did not. He moved around the desk and stopped in front of her. Logan made a decision, he said. Now I will make one. He was drunk. That is not a defense. He pushed me. He did not mean to. Damian's expression changed. Only slightly. It was enough to silence her. Do not defend the man who put that fear in your body. Grace looked down. I do not want anyone killed because of me. You are not responsible for what happens to him. You called Ben after I said his name. I called Ben because Logan forgot where he was. Damian's voice remained quiet, but something underneath it pressed against the room like a blade. This house has rules. He broke one. Grace looked toward the door. She wanted to leave. She also wanted to know exactly what rule Logan had broken. Damian seemed to read the question in her face. No one touches what is under my protection. I am not under your protection. You are now. The words landed with the weight of a lock turning. Grace opened her mouth, but Damian had already stepped away. He picked up the coffee she had brought him. It had gone untouched. He carried it to the fireplace and poured the black liquid over the flames. The fire hissed. White steam curled into the air. Mrs. Whitmore will relieve you of your duties for 3 days, he said. You will be paid. Grace stared at him. I can work. You will rest. I need the money. You will be paid. That is not how this house works. Damian looked back at her. It is how it works tonight. Grace felt something unfamiliar move through her. Not relief. Relief would have been simple. This was fear mixed with the dangerous warmth of being seen. She hated how much part of her wanted to believe him. Damian moved toward the door and opened it. Ben Archer stood outside. He was a broad-shouldered man with close-cropped hair and the still posture of someone who had spent years waiting for violence. Damian spoke without looking away from Grace. Take her downstairs. Grace stepped toward the hallway. Grace. She stopped. Damian's eyes moved to the Bruise one final time. Lock your door. The order followed her all the way to the basement. The staff quarters sat beneath the north wing where the walls were concrete and the air smelled of bleach, damp pipes, and old heat. Grace's room was barely large enough for a narrow bed, a dresser, and a metal chair. The radiator beneath the small window struck itself every time the boiler started producing a hard clank that traveled through the walls. Ben stopped outside her door. Grace turned to him. Where are you taking Logan? Ben's face did not change. You heard Mr. Cross. That was not my question. No. Grace searched his expression. Is he going to kill him? Ben looked down the corridor. Somewhere in the distance, a washing machine began its final cycle. I would lock the door, he said. Then he walked away. Grace entered her room and turned the deadbolt. She stood with her back against the door, listening to Ben's footsteps disappear. The room felt smaller than it had that morning. She sat on the edge of the bed. Her hands would not stop shaking. For 2 years, Grace had feared being noticed by the Cross family. Now, Damian Cross had noticed her completely. She touched the bruise. Pain pulsed beneath her fingertips. Logan had caused it. Damian had looked at it as if someone had cut his name into her skin. Grace lay down without changing clothes. Sleep never came. Every sound became a threat. A door closing in the corridor. A man speaking above her. The faint growl of a car engine outside the basement window. She imagined Logan escaping Ben's men and coming back for her. She imagined Mrs. Whitmore knocking at dawn with a garbage bag and an envelope containing her final pay. She imagined Damian standing in the old seafood warehouse while Logan begged. The worst part was not knowing which image frightened her most. Morning arrived as a thin gray light against the ceiling. Grace had not moved. At 7, someone left a tray outside her door. Toast, eggs, coffee, a bowl of sliced fruit. There was no note. Grace opened the door only far enough to pull the tray inside. At 9, Mrs. Whitmore knocked. Grace remained seated on the bed. "Come in." The door opened. Mrs. Whitmore entered carrying fresh towels. Her eyes went immediately to Grace's face. This time, Grace did not turn away. Mrs. Whitmore placed the towels on the dresser. So that was the curling iron. Grace said nothing. Mrs. Whitmore's mouth tightened. "You should have told me. What would you have done?" The question came out sharper than Grace intended. Mrs. Whitmore looked at her. Grace continued before she could lose the courage. "Would you have reported Logan Cross to Damian? Would you have called the police? Would you have fired me to avoid the problem?" Mrs. Whitmore folded her hands in front of her. "I might have kept you away from him. You warned me he was back. I did. You knew what he was." A shadow passed over the older woman's face. "Men like Logan show you what they are long before anyone is willing to name it." Grace looked toward the floor. "Damian named it." "Yes." The answer was quiet. Mrs. Whitmore glanced toward the closed door. "Mr. Cross has ordered that no one disturb you except me. I do not need special treatment. It is not treatment." Mrs. Whitmore's eyes returned to the bruise. "It is a declaration." Grace felt cold. "What happened to Logan I do not know." "Do you believe that Mrs. Whitmore did not answer?" She moved toward the door. Before leaving, she stopped. "Eat something." Grace looked at the untouched tray. "I am not hungry. That has never stopped women like us from needing strength." The door closed. Grace remained alone. By afternoon, rumors had begun to move through the basement. They traveled through Pipe's laundry rooms and half-closed doors. Logan's apartment in Atlantic City had been cleared out before sunrise. His car had disappeared from the estate garage. One of the drivers said Damian had sent him to Europe. Another said Ben had returned near dawn with blood on his shirt cuff. A kitchen assistant claimed Logan had attacked a bartender and was being sent to rehab. No one spoke above a whisper. No one used Grace's name. That made it worse. On the second day, a sharp knock struck her door. Grace sat upright. "Who is it, Dr. Nolan Pierce?" She did not know the name. Before she could answer, Ben spoke from the hallway. "Open the door, Grace." She unlocked it. A man in his late 50s stood outside wearing a charcoal suit and carrying a black medical bag. His silver hair was combed neatly away from his face. Wire-framed glasses rested low on his nose. He looked more like the chief surgeon of a private hospital than someone who made house calls to Mafia estates. Ben stood behind him. Dr. Pierce lifted the bag slightly. "May I come in?" Grace stepped aside. "I cannot pay you." He entered. "That has already been handled." He placed the bag on the dresser and opened it. Grace remained near the door. Dr. Pierce removed a pair of gloves. "Sit down." "I am fine." He looked at the bruise. "No, you are functioning. That is not the same thing." Grace sat on the edge of the bed. The doctor pulled the metal chair closer and switched on a small light. "Look straight ahead." He examined her pupils. Then he asked her to follow his finger with her eyes. His touch was careful when he pressed around the cheekbone. Grace inhaled sharply. "No fracture," he said. "No indication of a serious concussion. The swelling is deep, but it should resolve." He checked the inside of her mouth. "You bit through the tissue. It stopped bleeding. That does not mean it is healed." He opened his bag again and placed 2 small bottles on the dresser. One for inflammation, one for pain. Take both with food. He added a jar of ointment and a flexible ice pack. 20 minutes at a time. Do not place the ice directly against the skin. Grace looked at the supplies. They were more expensive than anything in her room. "Did Damian send you?" Dr. Pierce removed his gloves. "Mr. Cross requested that I come." Does he request that for every employee? The doctor paused. No. Grace stared at him. For family sometimes. What am I? Dr. Pierce closed his bag. That is probably the question you should be asking him. He walked toward the door. Grace spoke again. Did you see Logan? The doctor stopped. Ben's expression did not change, but the room seemed to tighten. Dr. Pierce looked back at Grace. No, she did not know whether to believe him. After they left, Grace picked up one of the bottles. Her name was printed on the label. Grace Miller. Someone had called a pharmacy. Someone had given them her information. Someone had arranged everything before she knew she needed it. She should have felt cared for. Instead, she felt studied. By the third day, the bruise had begun to change. The darkest purple softened to green and yellow. The swelling along her jaw decreased. She could chew without pain moving into her ear. The improvement should have made her feel normal. Nothing in the estate felt normal anymore. That night, Grace heard two maids whispering in the laundry room. They say Logan is gone where no one knows. What did he do? A pause followed. Grace stood on the other side of the wall holding the ice pack against her face. Then one of the women answered. He touched something Damian did not want touched. Grace returned to her room before they could see her. On the fourth morning, she dressed for work. The uniform felt like armor. Black dress, white apron, hair pinned neatly above the collar. The bruise remained visible, but Grace no longer tried to hide it. She climbed the concrete stairs into the service kitchen. The room was alive with sound. Knives struck cutting boards. Steam rose from steel pots. The head chef shouted at someone for burning onions. Grace pushed through the swinging door. Every sound stopped. It happened so quickly that the silence seemed violent. A dozen people looked at her, not with pity, with fear. A dishwasher lowered his hands into gray water. A cook froze with a knife above a pile of carrots. Two maids near the pantry stared openly at the fading bruise. Grace stood in the doorway. Her face grew hot. Mrs. Whitmore entered from the dry storage room. She saw Grace and stopped. "You are back." "Yes." Grace forced her voice to remain steady. "I can begin with the East Hall. I know the floors need waxing." "No." Mrs. Whitmore walked closer, though not as close as she usually did. "Maria will handle the East Hall, then the guest rooms. Anna has them." Grace looked around the kitchen. Everyone pretended to return to work. The sounds that followed were quieter and less natural. "What am I supposed to do?" Mrs. Whitmore handed her a silver feather duster. "The library, the sunroom, the ground floor only." Grace stared at the duster. "You gave me light duty. I was instructed to. By Damian." Mrs. Whitmore lowered her voice. "Do not make me repeat the instructions of the man who signs both our pay." Grace took the duster. During lunch, she carried her tray into the staff dining room. Two maids sat at the nearest table. The moment Grace approached, they gathered their plates and moved across the room. Grace stopped. One of them refused to meet her eyes. The other whispered, "Sorry." Grace sat alone. The food tasted like paper. For 2 years, no one had noticed her. Now no one could look at her for more than a second. She had not become important. She had become a warning. At 3 in the afternoon, Grace entered the library. Rain light pressed against the tall windows. The room smelled of leather dust and old wood. Shelves reached from the floor to the carved ceiling. Grace had cleaned the room hundreds of times, but had never been permitted to take a book from it. She dusted the lowest shelf. The doors opened behind her. She did not turn. She knew who had entered by the silence that followed. "You are working." Damian's voice moved across the room. Grace tightened her grip on the feather duster. "Mrs. Whitmore assigned me light duty." The doors closed. A lock clicked. Grace looked over her shoulder. Damian wore a dark 3-piece suit. The knot of his tie was slightly loose. Faint shadows rested beneath his eyes. He looked as if he had not slept. He crossed the library without making a sound. Grace forced herself to remain still. Damian stopped in front of her. "Look at me." She raised her eyes. His gaze traveled over the bruise. The muscle in his jaw tightened. "Pierce said there was no fracture. He told you." "I asked." Grace lowered the duster. "Thank you for sending him." Damian said nothing. "And for the medicine." "You will not thank me for cleaning up damage that should never have occurred." Grace studied his face. "What did you do to Logan?" Damian reached for the duster and removed it from her hand. He said it on a reading table. He will not return to this estate. That is not what I asked. No. Is he dead? Damian met her gaze. He was alive when he left New Jersey. Grace felt the blood leave her face. Where did he go? Somewhere he can no longer embarrass my family. You hurt him. Yes. The direct answer unsettled her more than denial would have. Because of me. Because of him. Grace stepped back. He pushed me once. He cornered you. He put his hands on you. He left you on the ground and walked away. Damian's voice remained low. Do not reduce what he did because the truth frightens you. I do not want blood on my hands. It is not on your hands. It feels like it is. Damian looked at her raw fingers. The skin around her nails was red from cleaning chemicals. He reached for her hand. Grace pulled it back. Something dark passed through his eyes, but he did not force the contact. Why are you here? He asked. I work here. Why? Grace frowned. You know why people work. That answer is not enough. I need money. For what? She looked toward the windows. That is private. Nothing affecting your safety inside my house is private. Grace laughed once. There was no humor in it. You really believe that? Yes. Damian moved toward a small bar near the fireplace and poured water into a glass. He did not offer it to her. Your father owed $40,000 to the Barrett crew. Grace stopped breathing. Damian continued. Interest and penalties raised the balance to $80,000. How do you know that? The same way I know your brother leaves Riley's auto repair at 6. Grace's fear sharpened. Do not talk about Evan. The Barrett crew already does. She crossed the room before she realized she was moving. If you sent men near him, I sent men to make sure no one else was. Grace stared at him. Damian placed the glass down. The debt is gone. The words did not make sense. What I purchased it this morning. Grace waited for the rest of the sentence. None came. You purchased my father's debt. Yes. From Russell Barrett. Yes. How he signed the paper. That is not what I asked. It is the answer that matters. Grace pressed one hand against the edge of a table. $80,000. The number had controlled every day of her adult life. She had measured food against it, sleep against it, her brother's safety against it. Now Damian spoke of it as if it were a receipt he had removed from a drawer. The balance is 0, he said. The Barrett crew has no financial claim on you or Evan. Relief came first. It rushed through her so violently that her knees weakened. For one bright second she imagined Evan leaving work without looking over his shoulder. She imagined a Sunday dinner, a life where every dollar did not already belong to someone else. Then she looked at Damian. The relief died. In your world, no one gives away $80,000. I did not give it away. Her throat tightened. What do you want? Damian studied her. I want no other man holding leverage over you. That is not an answer. It is the only one you are getting today. I cannot pay you back. I did not ask you to. I make less in a year than that debt. I know I have nothing. Damian stepped closer. Grace held her ground. His voice lowered. You have spent so long being treated like a balance on a page that you believe money is the only thing anyone could want from you. Grace felt exposed. She hated him for seeing it. What do you want from me? I want you safe. You barely knew my name 4 days ago. I knew your name. The answer came too quickly. Grace looked at him. Damian continued. You worked in my house for 2 years. You never stole. You never repeated a conversation. You covered shifts when other employees were sick. You sent most of your pay to your brother and walked to the bus station in winter because you refused to spend money on a car service. Grace could not speak. You knew all that. I know what happens in my house. Then you knew about Logan. The word struck him. His face became still. No, you knew everything else. Not that. Mrs. Whitmore warned me when he came back. The maids avoided rooms he entered. People knew. Damian looked toward the fire. For the first time, Grace saw something in him that resembled shame. It lasted only a moment. When I discovered it, he said I ended it. That does not change what happened. No. His agreement surprised her. Damian turned back. It will change what happens now. Grace felt the room narrow around them. What does that mean? You will no longer work in the kitchens or staff quarters? Her stomach tightened. You are firing me. No. Then what are you doing? Your belongings are being moved to the 3rd floor. Grace stared at him. The third floor belonged to Damian's senior members of the organization and guests important enough to receive armed protection. No. Damian's expression did not change. You will have a private suite. No, you will take your meals in the main dining room. I said no. His eyes darkened. Grace's heart pounded, but she continued. I am not moving upstairs. The basement is not secure. It was secure enough for 2 years. You were not a target for 2 years. I became one because of you. The accusation entered the silence between them. Damian did not deny it. Grace took another step back. I want my job. You will have responsibilities. I want my room. You will have a better one. I want things to go back to the way they were. Damian's voice softened. They cannot. Grace looked toward the abandoned feather duster. This is a cage. Yes. The answer stopped her. Damian stepped closer. It has guards, doctors, food, and walls the Barrett crew cannot cross. A cage is still a cage. Outside these gates, Russell Barrett sees you as a debt he lost. Logan sees you as the reason he lost his place in this family. Every man who wants to reach me will eventually understand that you matter. I do not matter to you. Damian's gaze held hers. You do. The words were quiet, absolute. Grace felt something dangerous move through her chest. She hated that it was not entirely fear. Damian walked to the library doors and unlocked them. He opened one side. The hallway waited beyond. Leave if you want. Grace looked at him, then at the open door. You said I was moving upstairs. I did. You said I was under your protection. You are. Then why open the door? Because I will not drag you. Grace almost laughed. You do not need to. You paid the debt. You moved Evan under guard. You made everyone in this house afraid to speak to me. Damian said nothing. You closed every other door before opening this one. His expression tightened. Grace walked toward the hallway. She stopped beside him. If I go outside, those gates will Barrett leave Evan alone. No, will Logan. A pause. I do not know. Then this is not a choice. No, Damian said. It is survival. Grace stepped into the hallway. Ben stood beside the elevator. A small silver key waited in his hand. Behind her, Damian remained inside the library. Grace did not look back. Ben opened the elevator and inserted the key into the panel. The doors slid apart without a sound. Grace entered. The polished metal reflected her bruised face, her plain uniform, and the fear she could no longer hide. Ben turned the key. The doors closed. As the elevator began to rise, Grace watched the basement floor number disappear. She had spent 2 years trying to become part of the walls. Now the walls themselves were carrying her upward. The gilded cage. The elevator stopped with a soft chime. Grace had expected the doors to open onto another hallway like the ones below. They did not. The third floor felt separated from the rest of the estate by more than height. Dark walnut covered the floors. The walls were wrapped in muted gray silk. Brass lamps cast warm circles of light across paintings that looked too valuable to hang in any house where people actually lived. There were no carts, no buckets, no smell of bleach, no voices coming through the walls. The silence was so complete that Grace could hear the faint movement of the ocean beyond the windows. Ben stepped out first. Grace followed. Her shoes sounded wrong against the polished wood. Too soft, too cheap. Each step seemed to announce that she did not belong there. They walked to the far end of the corridor. Ben stopped before a pair of dark wooden doors and opened them. Grace remained outside. "This is yours," he said. She looked past him. The room was larger than the staff dining hall. A king-size bed stood against a wall covered in deep green fabric. A stone fireplace burned beneath a carved mantel. 2 leather chairs faced tall windows overlooking the Atlantic. The bathroom doors stood open. Grace could see white marble silver fixtures and a bathtub large enough to drown in. On the bed lay a dark green dress. Beside it sat a pair of black shoes, a silver necklace, and a folded set of undergarments. Grace felt heat rise into her face. Who chose those? Ben looked at the clothes. I do not know. That means Damian. It means I do not know. Grace stepped into the room. Her fingers brushed the fabric of the dress, silk, cool and smooth against the raw skin of her hand. She found no size label, no price tag, nothing that suggested the dress had ever hung in a store. Grace looked at Ben. How does it fit me? His expression remained neutral. Dinner is at 8. That was not my question. No, the answer reminded her of Damian. Ben moved toward the door. Grace followed. Am I locked in? He opened the door fully. No. Can I leave the room? Yes. Can I leave the floor? Yes. Can I leave the estate? Ben stopped. Grace waited. He did not answer. She looked past him into the silent hallway. There are no locks, she said. No, but there are guards. Yes, and gates. Yes, and men who know where my brother works. Ben studied her bruised face. Your brother is being watched for his protection. People always use that word when they want obedience. Something moved in Ben's eyes. It might have been respect. It might have been regret. Dinner is at 8, he repeated. He left. The door closed without locking. Grace stood in the middle of the room. She waited a full minute before testing the handle. It opened. Ben stood against the opposite wall. He did not look at her. Grace closed the door again. The room was not a prison because of the lock. It was a prison because every road beyond it belonged to Damian Cross. She walked to the windows. The ocean struck the cliffs below in bursts of white foam. Farther out, the water became black beneath the approaching evening. Grace had never seen the estate from this height. From the servants' wing, the walls had seemed endless. From the 3rd floor, they looked almost beautiful. That made them worse. She returned to the bed. The dress waited. Her uniform smelled faintly of floor polish. The white apron was still folded across her waist. Grace removed it first. She placed it carefully on a chair. Then she changed. The dress fit perfectly, not almost, perfectly. It followed her waist without pulling and fell to her ankles in a clean line. The sleeves covered her shoulders. The neckline revealed more skin than her uniform, but less than she had feared. Grace stood before the mirror. The woman staring back at her did not look like a maid. She did not look free either. The bruise remained visible against the dark fabric. At 7:55, Grace opened the door. Ben was waiting. His gaze moved over the dress once. No surprise appeared in his face. That frightened her more than if he had stared. You knew it would fit. I knew someone made sure it would. They walked down the corridor. Grace noticed 2 closed doors before they reached the private dining room. Who lives up here, Mr. Cross? Who else? Sometimes Mr. Mercer. Caleb. Yes. Does he know I was moved here? Ben looked toward the dining room. He knows now. The doors opened. The table inside could seat 20 people. Only 3 places were set. Damian sat at the head. He had removed his suit jacket, though his white shirt remained buttoned at the wrists. A glass of bourbon rested near his hand. Caleb Mercer sat to his right. He was lean, sharp-faced, and still in a way that did not resemble Damian's stillness. Damian's silence felt like control. Caleb's felt like calculation. Both men looked at Grace. Damian's gaze moved slowly over the dress. The tension around his mouth eased, only slightly. It was the closest Grace had seen him come to approval. Caleb showed no such reaction. His eyes paused on the bruise, then on the empty chair beside Damian. Grace remained near the doors. Damian gestured toward the seat to his left. Sit. She walked to the chair. Ben pulled it back for her. Grace sat. Her hands disappeared beneath the table. Caleb lifted his wine. I thought the staff ate downstairs. Damian did not look at him. She is no longer staff. Grace felt the words move through the room. Caleb placed his glass down. What is she? Damian looked at Grace before answering. Under my protection. Caleb's mouth tightened. That phrase has become expensive. A pair of servers entered carrying covered silver dishes. They placed food before each person and left without speaking. Roasted lamb, potatoes, carrots glazed with something sweet. Grace had eaten the same meal many times in the staff dining room, though. There it came from what remained after the family finished. She picked up her fork. Caleb continued. $80,000 paid to Barrett. Logan removed from New Jersey. Security doubled around one mechanic in Atlantic City. Grace's fork stopped. Caleb noticed. So she did not know. Damian turned his head. Choose your next words carefully. Caleb leaned back. I am choosing them as a man responsible for keeping this organization alive. You are responsible for following my decisions. I have followed every decision you made for 15 years, and yet you sound uncertain now. Caleb looked at Grace. She forced herself not to lower her eyes. There is a difference between uncertainty and concern. Then be concerned quietly. The air in the room tightened. Caleb's attention returned to Damian. Barrett believes we stole one of his accounts. He was paid. He was embarrassed. Embarrassment is not a financial loss. It becomes one when other men begin to think his paper can be purchased whenever we feel sentimental. Damian placed his fork down. The silver struck the plate softly. It was enough to silence Caleb. Grace could feel Damian's anger without looking at him. You will not describe what happened to her as sentiment. Caleb did not move. Then tell me what it is. Damian leaned back. An internal failure that required correction. Logan was family. Logan was a liability. He was your cousin. He was a drunk who believed my name protected him from consequences. Caleb's gaze shifted to the bruise again. An $80,000 correction is still expensive. Damian's voice became quiet. How long have we known each other? 15 years. In those 15 years, have you known me to make a decision without understanding its cost? No. Have you known me to make a decision based on pity? No. Then stop questioning the price. Caleb's jaw moved. The Barrett crew will respond. Let them. They will not come through the front gates. They will look for something softer. Grace felt the meaning of the words. Damian felt it too. His eyes darkened. Caleb continued. She is a weakness because you have made her one. Damian stood. The motion was slow. Caleb remained seated, but his shoulders stiffened. Grace forgot to breathe. Damian placed both hands on the table. You will treat Grace with the same respect you show me. Caleb stared at him. You are placing her beside you after 4 days. I am placing her beyond your judgment. This house is not built around personal feelings. It is built around my authority. The words settled across the table. Caleb looked at Grace. His expression contained no hatred, only distrust. That made him more dangerous. He gave a stiff nod. Understood. Damian sat again. Dinner continued. Grace forced herself to eat 3 bites. The lamb had no taste. Caleb spoke only when Damian asked a direct question about the docks. He reported that 2 trucks had been delayed and 1 casino manager had refused to release payment. Grace understood enough to know that Barrett was already pushing back. She also understood that her presence at the table had transformed a private dispute into something every man in Damian's organization would discuss. When dessert arrived, Caleb declined it. He stood. Good night, Damian. His gaze moved to Grace. Miss Miller. It was the first time anyone had addressed her that way. It did not sound respectful. It sounded like a warning spoken politely. Caleb left. The doors closed behind him. Grace placed her napkin on the table. He is right. Damian lifted his bourbon. He often is. You are creating enemies. I already have enemies. You gave them a reason to notice me. They noticed you before I did. Grace pushed her chair back. The Barrett crew noticed a payment. Logan noticed a maid he thought he could hurt. You made me important. Damian watched her stand. You were important before I understood it. To whom your brother? The answer stopped her. Damian set down his glass. You spent 2 years working 16-hour days because your father made a mistake. You sent most of your money to Evan. You allowed him to believe your life was easier than his because you did not want him carrying your fear. Grace looked toward the windows. You had me investigated. I had the debt investigated. You learned everything else along the way. Yes. Did you read my messages? No. Listen to my calls? No. How do I know that you do not? Grace turned back. At least you are honest. I have no reason to lie to you. You have every reason. You want me calm. Damian stood. Grace's body tightened. He noticed. He remained on the opposite side of the table. I do not expect calm from you. What do you expect? Truth. You bought my debt without asking. Yes, you moved Evan without telling me. His expression changed. Only a fraction. You moved him. I reduced his exposure. Where is he safe? Where? A hotel in the city. Grace stepped toward him. You took my brother from his apartment. He went willingly. Did he know why? No. Then he did not go willingly. Damian's voice remained controlled. He believes his employer assigned him to maintain a fleet of hotel vehicles. You lied to him. I kept him alive. You do not know that anyone was going to hurt him. The Barrett crew sent you his schedule. Grace stopped. Damian continued. They did not send it because they were interested in his employment. You should have told me. If I told you, you would have called him. He would have panicked. Barrett watches his phone. He is my family. That is why I protected him. You do not get to reorganize people's lives because you have more guns. Damian crossed the distance between them. Grace remained still. You think I enjoy frightening you. I think you do not care. His eyes held hers. I care too much. The answer came quietly. Grace felt it beneath her ribs. She hated him for saying it. She hated herself for hearing the truth inside it. Damian lifted one hand. He stopped before touching her. The pause was deliberate. Grace understood that he was waiting. She did not move away. His fingers brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was gentle. His gaze remained on the bruise. I should have seen him before he touched you. Grace swallowed. You cannot see everything. I am expected to, by whom everyone who lives because I do. The words revealed something vast and tired beneath his control. Grace looked at the shadows beneath his eyes. Did you sleep last night? Damian's hand lowered. That is not your concern. You made everything about me your concern. A faint shift moved through his expression. Grace almost thought he might smile. Almost. You should return to your room, he said. She looked at the untouched dessert. You are dismissing me. I am allowing you to rest. There is that word again. Damian stepped aside. Grace walked toward the doors. Before she reached them, he spoke. Grace, she turned. You will speak to Evan tomorrow. Her anger softened before she could stop it. Thank you. Damian's gaze held hers. Do not thank me for returning something I should not have taken. Grace left the room without answering. The next morning, Mrs. Whitmore arrived with 3 garment bags. Grace opened the door wearing the same green dress. The older woman looked at the bed. You slept in that? I did not know where my uniform was. It has been removed. Grace's chest tightened. Where stored? I want it back. Mrs. Whitmore carried the garment bags to the wardrobe. You will not need it. That is not the same as not wanting it. Mrs. Whitmore hung the clothes. Dresses, blouses, trousers, soft sweaters. Nothing had a label. Grace touched one sleeve. This is too much. It is what Mr. Cross ordered. Does everyone in this house stop thinking when he orders something? Mrs. Whitmore looked at her. No, we simply think quietly. Grace sat on the edge of the bed. Why is everyone afraid of me? They are not afraid of you. They leave rooms when I enter. They fear the consequence of making you unhappy. That is worse. Mrs. Whitmore closed the wardrobe. Mr. Cross has never elevated an employee this quickly. I did not ask to be elevated, no. The older woman adjusted one of the hangers. But you should understand what happened. Damian paid a debt and moved me into a room. He declared you protected, like property. Mrs. Whitmore was silent. Grace looked at her. You agree. I have served powerful men for 32 years. That was not an answer. It is the answer. Mrs. Whitmore sat in the leather chair near the window. Her posture remained perfect. Men like Damian Cross do not know how to love gently. Grace's pulse changed. No one said anything about love. No. Then why did you, Mrs. Whitmore, look toward the ocean? Because he defends what he cares about the same way he defends territory. Grace folded her arms. By building walls, by destroying anything that crosses them, that is not love. I did not say it was. Mrs. Whitmore rose. Grace followed her to the door. Did you know his mother? The question came without planning. Mrs. Whitmore stopped. Her hand remained on the handle. I knew her. What happened to her? The older woman's face closed. That is not my story to tell. She left. Grace spent the afternoon in the library. No one had assigned her work. That should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like being erased in a new way. She chose a book from the highest shelf and sat near the windows. For the first time in 2 years, she opened something she had previously been permitted only to dust. The novel was about a detective searching for a missing woman. Grace read the same page 6 times. At 8, she returned to the dining room. Damian was alone. He had placed a telephone beside her plate. Grace sat. The phone rang. She answered immediately. Evan, hey. His voice sounded normal. Too normal. Grace closed her eyes. Where are you at the plaza? Riley got a contract to service hotel cars. Are you alone? No, 2 security guys are outside. Security. The hotel had some problem last month. It is fine. Grace looked at Damian. He poured water into her glass. Evan continued talking about the room, the television, and the amount of food delivered by room service. He had no idea. Grace wanted to tell him everything. She wanted to order him to leave. She saw Damian watching her, not threatening, waiting. "I miss you," she said. Evan became quiet. "You sound strange." "I am tired. You always say that too." Grace smiled despite herself. "Stay at the hotel. I have work. Stay there, Grace, please." He heard something in her voice. "Okay." After the call ended, Grace placed the phone down. "You listened." Damian picked up his fork. "I am sitting 3 feet away. You could have left. This is my dining room." Grace looked at him. "You use that answer when you do not have a better one. It is usually the best one." Dinner continued. Over the following days, the ritual repeated. At 8, Grace sat to Damian's left. He never touched her without waiting. He never apologized for watching her. He did not demand affection. He demanded her presence. On the 3rd evening, Grace found him reading the novel she had left open in the library. "You do not seem like someone who reads detective stories." "I am not." "Then why are you reading that you left it open? That does not explain anything." Damian turned a page. "I wanted to know what kept you awake." Grace took the book from his hand. "I was not awake because of the book. I know." On the 5th evening, Damian arrived late. Blood marked the cuff of his shirt. Grace noticed the way he avoided turning his left side. "You are hurt." "It is nothing. You are bleeding on the chair." Damian glanced down. "It can be replaced." Grace crossed to the cabinet containing medical supplies. "Sit." He looked at her. "Are you giving me an order? I am protecting the furniture." Something like amusement moved through his eyes. He sat. Grace unbuttoned the lower part of his shirt. A shallow knife wound crossed his ribs. His skin carried older scars. One near his shoulder was pale and uneven. Another ran along his side. Grace cleaned the fresh wound. Damian remained still. Who did this? A man who regretted it. That is not an answer. It is the only one you are getting tonight. Grace looked up. He had used her words against her. "Where did you get this scar?" She touched the one near his shoulder. Damian's body tightened. "My father." Grace waited. He offered nothing more. She covered the wound with clean gauze. When she finished, Damian caught her wrist. Not hard. His thumb rested over her pulse. "You are not afraid of blood. I cleaned yours from the floor for 2 years. His grip loosened. Grace pulled her hand away. On the 8th day, Ben entered the library while Grace was reading. His expression was more severe than usual. "Stay on the 3rd floor today. Why security concern? What kind? I cannot discuss it." Grace closed the book. "Does it involve Evan Barrett?" Ben did not answer. Grace stood. Silence is still an answer. He looked toward the door. 2 Barrett vehicles were seen near the north gate. Her stomach tightened. Did they try to enter? No. Then why were they there to be seen? Ben left. That evening, voices carried through the closed doors of Damian's study. Grace stopped in the hallway. Caleb was inside. "You cannot build policy around one woman," Damian answered. "Watch me. She is already affecting the docks. Barrett is affecting the docks. Because you took his leverage. I paid for his paper. You humiliated him. He will recover, and if he takes the brother, he will not. You cannot guard every weakness forever." Damian's voice became colder. "She is not a weakness. She is the first thing I have seen you fear losing." Silence followed. Grace stepped away before either man opened the door. She returned to her suite. Rain had begun to strike the windows. A flash of lightning brightened the room. Grace sat in the chair facing the ocean. She thought about Damian's scars, about Evan in a hotel room surrounded by men carrying guns, about the doors that opened only because guards stood behind them. Something scraped against the floor. Grace turned. A folded piece of paper slid beneath her door. She remained still. No footsteps followed. She crossed the room and picked it up. The paper had been torn from a garage receipt. 4 words were written across the back. "Barrett has Evan. Come alone." Grace read the message twice. Then she called her brother. The phone went directly to voicemail. She called Ben. No answer. The rain struck harder. Grace opened the wardrobe and pushed Damian's clothes aside. At the back, beneath a folded blanket, she found the jeans and gray sweater she had worn before moving upstairs. She changed quickly. The paper disappeared inside her boot. When Grace opened the door, the hallway was empty. For the first time since entering the gilded cage, no one stood between her and the stairs. The storm test. The hallway was empty. Grace stood outside her room listening. No footsteps, no voices. Only rain pressing against the windows and the distant vibration of thunder moving over the Atlantic. Ben should have been there. One of Damian's guards should have been near the elevator. The absence felt wrong, but the note inside Grace's boot felt worse. Barrett has Evan. Come alone. She closed the door quietly behind her. The polished hallway stretched in both directions. To the left was the elevator. To the right was the private stairwell used by senior staff and security. Grace chose neither. She walked past Damian's study and stopped beside a narrow panel covered in gray silk. For 2 years, she had watched housekeepers disappear through that wall carrying linens and empty trays. The panel opened when pressure was applied beneath the lower molding. Grace pressed her fingers against it. A hidden latch released. The wall moved inward. Darkness waited behind it. Grace slipped through and pulled the panel closed. The service passage smelled of dust and old wood. A single bulb burned near the ceiling, casting weak yellow light over exposed pipes and narrow stairs. The men who lived on the 3rd floor rarely used these passages. They moved through the center of the house because they expected every door to open for them. Grace had spent 2 years moving along the edges. The edges remembered her. She descended quickly. Her boots struck the wooden steps with soft, controlled taps. She kept one hand on the wall as thunder shook the narrow space. At the 2nd floor landing, voices moved through the adjoining corridor. 2 guards spoke near the elevator. Grace stopped. "I thought Archer had the north gate," one man said. "He did. Cross moved him. We're no idea." Their footsteps faded. Grace continued down. The passage opened behind a linen room on the 1st floor. She pushed through a narrow door and found rows of folded sheets stacked beneath fluorescent lights. No one was inside. She crossed the room and entered the laundry corridor. Machines hummed behind closed doors. Steam clung to the ceiling. A maid pushed a cart across the far intersection without looking in Grace's direction. Grace waited until she disappeared. Then she moved. She passed the staff dining room, the pantry, and the storage room where she had once hidden to call Evan. Every step carried her deeper into the life Damian had removed her from. The floors changed from walnut to tile. The air changed from cedar and firewood to bleach and hot metal. For one moment the familiarity steadied her. This was the world she understood. Doors with loose hinges, cameras with blind corners, people too busy to look twice. Grace reached the basement stairwell. She ran down. At the bottom she turned toward the old wine cellar. The main basement exit would be guarded, but the original estate had been built with a coal delivery passage that connected to the greenhouse. Mrs. Whitmore believed the door had been sealed years ago. Grace knew better. She had found it during her first winter while searching for a leaking pipe. The wine cellar was dark. Grace moved between wooden racks following the wall until her fingers found a cold iron handle. She pulled. The door resisted. She planted one boot against the stone and pulled again. Rust broke free with a soft crack. The door opened into a narrow tunnel. Cold air rushed toward her. Grace entered and closed the door behind her. The tunnel sloped upward beneath the north lawn. Water dripped from the ceiling. Mud covered the floor. Roots had broken through the stone in several places, twisting across the walls like black veins. Grace moved as quickly as she could. Her breath sounded too loud. Evan's voicemail greeting repeated in her mind. "Hey, this is Evan. Leave a message unless you are selling something." She had called 3 times. No answer. Damian had promised he was safe. Damian had promised many things without ever telling her enough to know whether the promises were real. Grace reached the end of the tunnel. A wooden door stood ahead. She pushed against it. It did not move. She pressed her shoulder into the boards. The door opened 2 inches, blocked by something heavy on the other side. Grace lowered herself and pushed again. A metal shelf scraped across concrete. Wind burst through the gap. She forced the door open far enough to slip into the greenhouse. Rain hammered the glass roof. Rows of dead planting beds filled the interior. Ivy had grown through broken panes and spread across the floor. The greenhouse had once supplied flowers for the estate. Now it was used for storage. Grace moved behind stacked clay pots and reached the outer door. A heavy chain hung from the handles. Her stomach dropped. Then she saw that the lock had not been closed completely. Someone had been careless, or someone wanted the door to open. Grace hesitated. The empty hallway, the missing guards, the loose lock. Something about the path felt too easy. Lightning flashed beyond the glass. Evan's name pressed against her thoughts. Grace pulled the chain free. She opened the door and stepped into the storm. Rain struck her face with enough force to make her gasp. Within seconds, her sweater clung to her body. Water ran into her eyes and down the back of her neck. She crossed the lawn. The estate rose behind her, its windows glowing against the black sky. From a distance, Blackwater Point looked like a ship built of stone stranded above a violent sea. Grace lowered her body and moved beside the hedge line. Security lights swept across the grounds in slow arcs. She waited for the first beam to pass, then ran to the next row of shrubs. Mud pulled at her boots. Her breath burned. The perimeter wall stood beyond the greenhouse, 12 feet of stone topped with iron spikes. Grace knew there was one place where the wall could be crossed. An old oak tree had grown too close to the western edge. One of its branches extended over the iron fence. Mrs. Whitmore had complained about it for years. Damian had never ordered it cut. Grace reached the tree. Rain streamed down its trunk. She placed one boot against the rough bark and pulled herself upward. Her hand slipped. She tried again. The second time, her fingers found a deep split in the wood. Grace hauled herself onto the lowest branch. Pain moved through her shoulders. She climbed higher. The road beyond the wall appeared through the rain. No lights, no cars, no sign of anyone waiting. Grace did not know how she would reach the old marina. She would find a telephone, a passing driver. She would walk if she had to. She swung one leg across the branch. "Where are you going, Grace?" The voice came from behind her, quiet, clear, more powerful than the storm. Grace froze. Her boot slipped. The branch moved beneath her. She grabbed for the trunk, but wet bark tore from beneath her fingers. She fell. Her shoulder struck the mud first. The impact forced the air from her lungs. Grace rolled onto her back. Rain filled her eyes. Damian stood 10 feet away. He wore a black coat over dark clothes. Water ran through his hair and along the hard line of his face. Ben stood behind him with 2 armed men. None of them appeared surprised to see her. Damian did not look angry. He looked disappointed. The expression entered Grace more deeply than rage would have. She pushed herself onto one elbow. "You knew." Damian stepped closer. "Get up. You knew I was leaving. Get up, Grace." She rose unsteadily. Mud covered the side of her sweater. Her hair clung to her cheeks. Damian's gaze moved over her, checking for injuries. Grace pulled the note from her boot and held it toward him. "They have Evan." "No, you do not know that. I know exactly where your brother is. I called him. He was told not to answer." Grace stared at him. The rain struck harder. Why Damian did not respond quickly enough. Grace felt the truth before he spoke. "You did this. No, you knew about the note. I knew Caleb intended to test the security around you." Grace looked toward Ben. Ben's expression remained fixed, but he did not meet her eyes. "What does that mean?" Damian stepped close enough to take the note from her hand. He read it once, his jaw tightened. "I did not know he would use your brother." Grace laughed. The sound broke apart in the rain. "You expect me to believe that?" "Yes. Why should I believe anything you say?" Damian folded the note. "Because Evan is safe. He was safe before you brought him into this. No. You do not know that. The Barrett crew knew where he worked. They knew when he left. They knew which bus he took home." Grace shook her head. "You paid the debt, and Barrett lost a source of income. You made it personal. It was already personal to them." Grace moved past him. Damian caught her arm. "Let go. You are not leaving. They told me to come alone. They want you frightened. They have my brother." "They do not. You keep saying that." Damian reached into his coat and removed his phone. He opened a security feed and held the screen toward her. Evan sat in a hotel room. The image was clear enough for Grace to see the red shirt he had worn the last time they spoke. A pizza box lay open on the table. 2 men sat near the door playing cards. A digital timestamp moved at the bottom of the screen. Current time. Evan leaned forward and laughed at something one of the guards said. Grace stared. Her body stopped fighting. "He is safe," Damian said. She looked from the screen to his face. "You have cameras in his room, in the living area. He does not know." "No, you moved him without telling me." "Yes, you told him not to answer my calls. For the last hour." Why, Damian looked at the note in his hand. "Caleb wanted to know what you would do if you believed your brother was threatened." Grace could hear her own heartbeat. "He wanted to test me." "Yes, and you let him. I allowed him to review the security protocols. You let him frighten me. I did not approve this, but you knew something was happening." Damian said nothing. That silence became an answer. Grace struck him. Her palm hit the side of his face. Ben moved forward. Damian raised one hand. Ben stopped. Grace stared at the red mark appearing across Damian's cheek. He turned his face back toward her. She hit his chest with both fists. "You watched me run." Damian absorbed the blows. "You watched me believe Evan was going to die. I was never going to let you leave the grounds. That is not the point." Grace hit him again. "You built this." Her fists struck wet fabric and solid muscle. "You moved me upstairs. You watched every door. You followed every call. Then you opened a path and waited to see whether I would use it." Damian caught her wrists. Grace fought against him. "Let me go. Stop. No!" She twisted, trying to pull free. "You do not get to tell me to stop, Grace. You do not get to decide when I am afraid." Damian's grip remained firm but did not tighten. "You do not get to decide what I know. You do not get to move my brother and call it mercy. You do not get to turn my life into a test." Lightning split the sky. Grace pulled one hand free and struck his chest again. "He is all I have." Damian looked down at her. Rain ran over his face. "You think I do not know that, no. I think you know it so well that you use it." The words landed between them. Damian released her. Grace stepped backward. For the first time since she had known him, he looked as if he had no answer ready. "You keep telling me the world outside will hurt me," she said. "Maybe it will, but every time you decide I am too weak to know the truth, you become another man deciding what happens to my life." Damian's expression changed. Something opened behind the control. Not anger. Recognition. Grace turned toward the estate. Her knees trembled. She had made it 3 steps when the strength left her. The ground shifted beneath her. Damian reached her before she fell. One arm caught her waist. The other supported her shoulders. Grace pushed weakly against him. "Do not carry me. You cannot walk." "I can." She tried to stand. Her legs failed again. Damian lifted her. Grace stopped fighting only because her body had nothing left. She rested her forehead against the wet fabric of his coat. His heart beat steadily beneath her cheek. "You are not forgiven," she whispered. "I know. You are not allowed to call this protection. I know. You are not allowed to tell me what I feel. I know." The words were different from the ones Damian usually gave her. No argument. No command. No claim. He carried her across the lawn. Ben and the guards followed at a distance. Grace looked back once. The oak tree moved in the wind. Beyond it, the road remained empty. The door had been open. There had simply been nowhere safe to go. Inside the estate, the lights felt too bright. Damian carried Grace through the greenhouse and into the service passage. He did not take her through the main hall. Grace was grateful for that. She did not want the staff to see her soaked muddy and held against his chest. They entered the 3rd floor through the private stairwell. Damian carried her into her suite and set her on the edge of the bed. Grace pulled away immediately. "Leave." His gaze moved over her face. "You are shaking. I am wet. You are in shock. I know what shock feels like." Damian removed his coat and placed it over a chair. His shirt beneath was soaked. "Pierce should examine you." "No, you fell from the tree. I landed in mud. You struck your shoulder." Grace looked at him. "How do you know I saw you fall?" "Of course you did." Damian accepted the accusation without defending himself. He walked toward the door. "I will send Mrs. Whitmore. I want to be alone. She will leave clothes outside." "Fine." Damian stopped with his hand on the door. Grace expected him to tell her she was forbidden to leave again. He said nothing. The door closed. Grace sat in the silence. Water dripped from her sweater onto the carpet. Her hands began to shake harder. She removed the wet clothes and stepped into the shower. Hot water struck her skin. She scrubbed mud from her arms, her neck, and her hair. She scrubbed until the skin around her wrists turned red where Damian had held her. There were no bruises. He had known exactly how much force to use. That knowledge did not comfort her. When Grace left the bathroom, dry clothes waited outside the bedroom door. A dark sweater, soft trousers, a thick towel. No guard stood in the hall. Grace dressed and sat in front of the fire. The flames moved behind the glass. She thought about Evan laughing in the hotel room. He was safe. The relief remained real. So did the betrayal. An hour later, voices rose from the private dining room. Grace opened her door. The hallway was empty. She followed the sound. The dining room doors were not fully closed. Caleb stood near the far end of the table. Damian faced him. Ben remained beside the windows. The folded note lay on the table between them. "You used her brother," Damian said. Caleb's expression remained controlled. "I used the only pressure point that mattered. You did so without my approval. You approved the test. I approved a review of her response to an external threat. That is what this was. You made her believe Evan had been taken. If she is going to remain in this house, we need to know whether she follows procedure." Damian stepped closer. "You wanted to prove she would run. She did run. She ran toward danger to protect her brother. She abandoned security. She ignored every guard and every protocol. She found a passage your security team failed to close." Caleb glanced toward Ben. Ben said nothing. Damian continued. "She crossed 3 monitored floors without being seen. She opened the greenhouse exit. She reached the perimeter wall." "That proves my point." "No. It proves you underestimated her." Caleb's jaw tightened. "She is not trained for this life. She survived 2 years inside it without protection. She survived because no one noticed her." Damian's voice lowered. "You noticed her enough to use her." Caleb looked toward the open doors. Grace knew he had seen her. She stepped into the room. Neither man spoke. Grace walked to the table and picked up the note. "Did you write this?" Caleb met her gaze. "I ordered it written." "Did you tell Evan not to answer no?" Damian answered from behind her. "I did." Grace looked at him, then back at Caleb. "What were you trying to prove, that your first loyalty is not to this house?" "My first loyalty was never to this house." Caleb's expression remained hard. "That is the problem." "No," Grace said. "That is the only reason I survived long enough to become your problem." Caleb studied her. Grace placed the note back on the table. "You thought I would run to Barrett. I thought you would make an emotional decision." "I did." "You could have been killed, so could Evan. He was never in danger." "I did not know that." Caleb looked at Damian. "That is exactly why the test worked." Damian moved so quickly that Caleb barely had time to turn. He caught Caleb by the collar and forced him backward against the table. Glasses shook. One fell and shattered on the floor. Ben remained still. Grace did not. "Damian." He did not look at her. His hand tightened around Caleb's collar. "If you ever use her brother again, you will lose more than your position." Caleb's face remained calm, though his breathing changed. "You are proving my argument." "What argument that she controls you?" Damian's eyes darkened. Grace stepped closer. "Let him go." Damian turned his head. The room became silent. Grace held his gaze. "I said let him go." For 1 second she believed he would refuse. Then Damian released Caleb. Caleb straightened his jacket. A red mark had formed along his throat. Grace looked at Damian. "I do not want people punished in my name. He endangered you. You allowed the test." Damian's face hardened. "I did not allow this version of it. You allowed enough." Caleb watched them both. Grace turned toward him. "You wanted to know whether I trust Damian?" "Yes, I do not." The answer landed harder than a shout. Damian did not move. Grace continued. "I trusted him enough to believe Evan was protected. Then I found a note under my door and no one answered my calls." Caleb said trust that fails under pressure is not trust. Trust without truth is obedience. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Grace stepped closer to the table. "You wanted to know whether I belong here. I do not know if I do, but I know this house has more hidden doors than your men understand. I know which employees avoid Logan's old rooms. I know which guards drink during the last hour of their shifts. I know the greenhouse lock has been broken for 6 months. Ben looked at her. Grace continued. I know because people like you walk past people like me and assume silence means ignorance. No one spoke. Caleb looked at Damian. She is still a risk. Damian's answer was immediate. So are you. Caleb absorbed the words. Damian moved to the head of the table. You retain your position. Caleb's expression shifted slightly. Your authority over Grace and Evan is finished. Ben controls their security. You do not test her. You do not move her. You do not use her name in negotiations. Caleb looked at Grace. And if she compromises the organization, Damian answered. Then I deal with it. Grace felt the old anger return. I am standing here. Damian looked at her. I know. Then stop discussing me like cargo. Caleb's mouth almost moved. It was not a smile, but it came close. Damian said, You are right. Grace stared at him. Caleb did the same. Damian looked toward Ben. Clear the room. Ben walked toward Caleb. Caleb adjusted his cuffs. Before leaving, he stopped beside Grace. You used the West Passage. Yes, the lower camera should have seen you. It points 3 feet too high. Caleb looked at Ben, then back at Grace. For the first time, his suspicion contained something else. Recognition. He left without another word. Ben followed. Grace remained near the table. Broken glass glittered on the floor. Damian poured water into a clean glass and held it toward her. Grace did not take it. You told him you would deal with me. I told him what he needed to hear. That is always your answer. No. Damian set the glass down. It is often my failure. Grace looked at him. The admission sounded unfamiliar in his voice. You cannot fix this by admitting you made a mistake. I know. You keep saying that. Because there is nothing else I can say tonight that will make it true for you. Grace folded her arms. What happens now? Damian looked toward the doors. You sleep. That is an order. No, it sounds like one. It is a request. Grace almost laughed. You do not know how to request anything. No. The honesty weakened her anger only enough to make it hurt. She returned to her room. Damian did not follow. The next morning, Grace woke before sunrise. She expected Ben outside her door. The hallway was empty. On the table near the fireplace sat a black leather folder. She had not heard anyone enter. Grace opened it. Her birth certificate lay inside, her identification documents, Evan's passport, the original Miller debt agreement stamped paid in red ink, a bank card, a set of car keys, a new phone. A sheet of paper listed an address in Atlantic City, the Plaza Hotel, room 1704. Grace heard the door open. Damian entered alone. He wore dark trousers and a black sweater. No jacket, no weapon visible. He stopped several feet from her. Grace held up the bank card. What is this enough money for you and Evan to leave New Jersey? Her fingers tightened around the card. The car parked near the south entrance. The phone, no tracking software. Why should I believe that you should not? Damian's answer was quiet. You should have it checked. Grace looked at the paid debt agreement. This remains paid if I leave, yes. You will not come after Evan, no. You will not come after me. Damian paused. I will make sure you are not followed. That was not my question. His eyes held hers. No, I will not bring you back. Grace set the card down. You said leaving was a death sentence. It may be. That sounds like a threat. It is a fact. Then the choice is not real. It is the only real choice I know how to give you. Damian moved toward the window. The storm had passed. Pale morning light spread over the ocean. The Barrett crew knows you matter to me, he said. That does not disappear because you leave. Ben can place you somewhere secure. New names, new city. Grace looked at his back. And Evan, he goes with you if he chooses. You are letting him choose. Yes. The difference between now and the night before was small. It was also everything. Grace picked up the keys. Why Damian turned. Because protecting you by becoming another man you fear is not protection. His voice remained controlled, but the words cost him something. Grace could see it. You still think I belong to you? Damian looked at the faded bruise along her jaw. I think part of me always will. That is not the same as me belonging to you. No. Grace waited. Damian continued. I was wrong. The room became very quiet. Damian Cross had ordered men removed from cities. He had purchased debts, moved lives, and built walls around anything he feared losing. 2 words seemed harder for him than all of it. Grace closed the folder. When can I see Evan? Ben will take you now, and after that, you decide. Damian walked to the door. He stopped before opening it. Grace expected him to look back. He did not. The debt is gone whether you stay or leave, he said. The car is yours. The money is yours. Your brother is not leverage. He opened the door. Grace stood beside the table with the keys in her hand. Damian stepped into the hallway. For the first time since he had seen the bruise on her face, he left without telling her where she belonged. The door remained open behind him. The choice. The door remained open behind Damian. Grace stood alone with the car keys pressed into her palm. For 2 years, every decision in her life had belonged to someone else. Her father had chosen the debt. Russell Barrett had chosen the interest. Logan had chosen to put his hands on her. Damian had chosen where she lived, where her brother slept, and how much truth she was allowed to know. Now no one was giving her an order. The silence felt heavier than any command. Grace placed the folder beneath her arm and walked into the hallway. Ben waited near the elevator. His eyes moved to the keys in her hand. Mr. Cross said you wanted to see your brother. He said you would take me. Ben pressed the elevator button. I will. The doors opened. Grace entered without looking back toward Damian's study. The journey into Atlantic City took less than an hour. Rainwater still covered the roads, turning the morning traffic into blurred lines of white and red. Grace sat in the rear of a black sedan while Ben drove. The leather folder rested on her lap. She opened it twice to make sure the paid agreement was still inside. The red stamp remained across the final page. Paid in full. She had imagined those words for years. In every version of that fantasy, she had felt free. Now she felt as though she were holding the remains of the person she had been. Ben watched her through the mirror. You can ask? Grace looked up. Ask whatever you have been deciding not to ask since we left. She closed the folder. Did Damian kill his father? Ben's hands remained steady on the wheel. Who told you there was something to ask Mrs. Whitmore would not talk about his mother? Damian said one of his scars came from his father. Ben drove through an intersection before answering. Damian was 12 the first time he found his mother unconscious. Grace looked toward the window. Ben continued. She told everyone she had fallen. His father told the same story. The words touched the fading memory of Damian standing beneath the brass lamp. I know what violence leaves behind. Did she fall? Grace asked. No. Ben's voice remained calm, but something hard moved beneath it. Damian's father controlled the Cross family before him. He controlled the ports, the casinos, the police, and everyone inside his house. His wife learned to cover bruises with makeup. The staff learned not to see them. Grace's fingers tightened around the folder. What happened to her? One night Damian found her at the bottom of the main staircase. His father said she had been drinking. Grace already knew the rest. She died. 2 days later. The road stretched ahead beneath the gray sky. Grace watched the city grow around them. Hotels rose beyond the highway. Casino towers cut into the clouds. Delivery trucks crowded the streets. How old was Damian when his father died? 17. And you expect me to believe that was an accident? Ben did not answer. Grace looked at him through the mirror. That does not excuse what Damian did to me. No. Then why tell me? Because you asked. That is not the only reason. Ben turned into the entrance of the Plaza Hotel. He stopped beneath the covered drive. His best instincts and his worst instincts come from the same place, he said. You should know that before you decide whether to leave. Grace looked toward the hotel entrance. And what do you think I should decide? Ben faced forward. I think Mr. Cross has enough men who tell him what he wants to hear. The hotel suite was on the 17th floor. Ben knocked twice. Locks moved on the other side. A guard opened the door. Evan stood near the windows holding a paper cup of coffee. For 1 second, neither of them moved. Then he crossed the room. Grace dropped the folder. Evan wrapped his arms around her. She pressed her face against his shoulder and felt something inside her finally break. He was warm. He was breathing. He was real. You scared me, she whispered. Evan pulled back. I scared you. His expression changed when he saw her face. The bruise had faded, but a pale yellow shadow remained near her jaw. What happened? Grace touched the mark. It is healing. Who did that, Evan? Who? The anger in his voice sounded young and helpless. Grace recognized it because she had carried the same anger for years. She guided him toward the sofa. "We need to talk." She told him about their father's debt. She told him about the messages from Barrett. She told him why she had accepted a job at Blackwater Point and why she had refused every offer of help. Evan listened without interrupting. His face became harder with every sentence. When Grace finished, he stood and walked toward the window. "You let me think everything was fine. I wanted you to have a normal life. You lied to me. I protected you." Evan turned. "That is what Damian says, is it not?" The word struck harder than Grace expected. She looked down at her hands. "Yes. You hate him for making decisions without telling you, but you did the same thing to me. I know." Evan stared at her. The anger in his face shifted. "Not gone. Wounded. You should have told me. You were 17. I am not 17 now. I kept waiting for the right time. There was never going to be one." Grace nodded. "No." Evan sat across from her. "What happens now?" She opened the leather folder and showed him the paid agreement, the money, the new phone, and the documents. "We can leave. Leave where anywhere. With what names? Ours, if we want. Will Barrett stop looking? I do not know. Will Cross Grace look toward the hotel door? He said he would not bring us back." Evan studied her carefully. "Do you believe him?" "Yes." It was the first answer that came without hesitation. Evan leaned forward. "Are you afraid of him?" "Yes." "Did he force you to stay?" "Not at first. That is not an answer." Grace looked at the paid agreement. "He made leaving impossible and called it a choice. And now the choice is real." Evan was quiet. "Do you want to go?" Grace looked toward the Atlantic beyond the glass. The city moved beneath them. Cars crossed wet streets. People entered buildings without guards. Waitresses carried coffee. Mechanics opened garages. Women walked alone beneath umbrellas. A life existed outside Damian's walls. It was imperfect, uncertain, and dangerous. It was hers if she wanted it. Grace imagined driving west with Evan. She imagined a small apartment where no one watched the doors. She imagined waking without hearing Damian's voice. The image should have brought relief. Instead, she saw the library, the dinner table, the moment Damian had waited before touching her, the way he had released Caleb when she told him to stop, the open door. "I want to return," she said. Evan stared at her. To him, to finish something. That sounds like what people say when they are about to make a terrible decision. It might be. "You love him," Grace breathed slowly. "I do not know what to call it. Does he love you? I do not know if he understands the word." Evan leaned back. "You are going anyway." "Yes." He looked at the bruise again. "If he puts another mark on you, I do not care how many guns he has." Grace almost smiled. "What will you do? I will think of something." For the first time that morning, she laughed. Grace returned to Blackwater Point before sunset. She did not use the servants' entrance. Ben stopped the car beneath the front steps. The iron doors opened. Grace walked into the entrance hall carrying the leather folder. Staff members paused as she crossed the marble. Mrs. Whitmore stood near the staircase. Her eyes moved over Grace's ordinary jeans, gray sweater, and old boots. "You returned." "I did." Mrs. Whitmore looked toward the east wing. "He is in the study." Grace climbed the stairs. No guard searched her outside Damian's doors. Ben opened them and remained in the hallway. Damian stood behind his desk. The red ledger lay open beneath the brass lamp. He looked at Grace. Nothing in his face changed, but his hand tightened around the edge of the desk. "You came back." "I came to negotiate." A faint trace of surprise entered his eyes. Damian gestured toward the chair. Grace remained standing. She placed the paid debt agreement on the desk. "This stays paid, yes, whether I remain here or not. Yes, you do not mention it when we disagree." His gaze held hers. "Agreed. Evan chooses where he lives. Agreed. You do not move him again without telling either of us. Agreed. No one tests me. Agreed. If a threat involves me or Evan, I know about it." Damian paused. Grace waited. "Agreed. You do not punish people in my name without telling me." His expression hardened. "If someone threatens your life, I will act. That is not what I said. I will tell you what happened, before or after, when possible before." Grace studied him. It was not complete surrender. She had not expected one. I want authority over the household staff. Damian's brows lifted. Why? Because Logan was not the first man to frighten an employee in this house. His face became still. Grace continued. Mrs. Whitmore warned me about him because everyone knew. No one believed they could stop him. What do you want? Changed written contracts. Medical care. A way for employees to report abuse without losing their jobs. Security rules that protect the kitchens and staff quarters, not only the family floor. Damian listened. And if a member of your family touches an employee without permission, that person is removed from the estate. Done. Grace had expected resistance. His immediate answer unsettled her. You did not think about it. I have been thinking about it since I saw your face. A knock struck the door. Caleb entered without waiting for permission. He stopped when he saw Grace. His eyes moved to the folder, then to Damian. We have a problem. Damian remained focused on Grace. Speak. Barrett is moving against the South Dock tonight. We believe he intends to take the shipment and force a meeting. Damian straightened. How many men unknown? He has hired outside crews. Grace looked at Caleb. Which South Dock? The one near the abandoned casino? Pier 9. Caleb studied her. Yes. Grace remembered late nights carrying coffee into rooms where men spoke as if she were furniture. Barrett cannot hold that dock. He does not need to hold it, Caleb said. He needs to damage us. No, he needs the shipment because his casino accounts are empty. Damian looked at her. How do you know that Grace walked toward the red ledger? Russell Barrett's collector met a casino accountant in the West Lounge every second Thursday. The accountant always carried a blue folder. Caleb's expression sharpened. Name Peter Sloan. Caleb looked at Damian. He manages cash for 3 smaller casinos. Grace nodded. Barrett used those casinos to move loan payments. 2 months ago, Sloan told someone the state audit had frozen one account. Last week, one of Barrett's men said they were moving everything through Pier 9. Caleb stared at her. You heard all of that. I served the coffee. Damian's eyes remained on Grace. What else? Barrett does not want a war. He needs cash. If you block the casino accounts and hold the shipment, he has nothing to pay the outside crews. Caleb stepped closer to the desk. We could reach Sloan. Do not threaten him, Grace said. Offer him protection. Barrett will assume he betrayed him either way. Caleb looked at Damian. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then Damian lifted the phone. Ben. He issued 3 short instructions. Find Peter Sloan. Secure Pier 9. No shooting unless Barrett shoots first. Damian returned the receiver to its cradle. Caleb continued looking at Grace. You remembered account movements while cleaning tables. Grace met his gaze. No one watches the maid. Something changed in Caleb's expression. Not warmth, respect. He gave her a small nod and left. Damian remained behind the desk. You just prevented a war. I prevented Evan from being caught inside one. You also protected this house. Grace looked toward the lamp. I lived here too. Damian came around the desk. He stopped several feet away. He did not reach for her. Are you staying? I am considering it. What remains to consider you? A shadow of impatience moved through him. Grace almost smiled. You are not accustomed to waiting. No, you should practice. Damian lowered himself onto one knee. The movement stole the breath from her. He looked up at her without shame or performance. I do not know how to be harmless, he said. I am not asking you to be. I do not know how to care without protecting, then learn to protect without imprisoning. And if I fail, I leave. Pain moved through his expression. He did not hide it. That is the price, Grace said. Damian nodded. Grace raised one hand. She waited until he leaned into it before touching his hair. You are still a monster. I know, you frightened me. I know, you tried to make a cage feel like a gift. I know. Her fingers moved to his cheek. If I stay, you are not my owner. No. You are not my jailer. No. Grace lowered her face toward his. You can be my monster. Damian's breathing changed. Only because I choose you. He closed his eyes. For 1 second, the most feared man on the New Jersey coast allowed himself to look relieved. When he opened them, Grace saw no command in his gaze, only a promise he had not yet earned the right to make. Several weeks later, Grace entered the estate kitchen. The room did not fall silent. Knives continued striking cutting boards. Pans moved across the stoves. Someone laughed near the pantry. Mrs. Whitmore handed Grace a folder containing the first written staff contracts in the history of Blackwater Point. A young maid approached them. Her hands shook. One of the visiting men followed me into the laundry room. Grace closed the folder. "What is his name?" the maid told her. Damian entered as she spoke. Fear crossed the young woman's face. Grace looked at him. He waited. He did not interrupt. Grace ordered the man removed from the property, stripped of 1 month's pay, and forbidden from entering any staff area again. No warehouse, no blood, no disappearance. Damian accepted her decision. That evening, Grace walked into the dining room beside him, not behind him. Caleb rose from his chair. Ben nodded. Damian pulled out the seat to his left. Grace sat because she wanted the chair. Outside, the Atlantic crashed against the cliffs. Inside, the fire burned steadily. Grace had once believed survival required her to become part of the wallpaper. Now she sat at the most dangerous table in New Jersey, visible to everyone. Not as a servant, not as a prisoner, not as a possession. She was the only person in the room powerful enough to tell Damian Cross no. And when she spoke, the monster listened.